Today, I'm going to share a story so quietly devastating that it left some people furious and others forever changed. It takes place in the American Wild West, where snow falls like ash, cabins glow against the darkness, and compassion is the rarest currency of all. This is a land where fate brings strangers together in moments that feel both dangerous and inevitable. It begins with a small act of mercy, so small it should have gone unnoticed, yet powerful enough to build a family where none was meant to exist. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind screamed through the tight streets of Cedar Ridge, flinging dust and icy rain hard enough to sting bare skin. February of 1873 showed no mercy to the frontier town, and none at all to those without walls to hide behind. Clara Whitlock pressed her shoulder against the side of Abigail Morrison's general store, trying to steal what little cover she could from the storm. Her dress, once decent brown wool, hung in ruin from her narrow frame. Mud clung to the hem from weeks on the road, and the sleeves were torn by brush and hard ground. She had walked 3 straight days to reach Cedar Ridge, driven forward by hunger and nowhere else to go. Her last coins had bought stale bread 2 towns back. "Please," she called to a woman wrapped in heavy furs passing by. "I'm looking for work, any work. I can clean, cook, tend animals." The woman only tightened her shawl and hurried on, pretending Clara wasn't there. It was the same silence she'd met a dozen times already that morning. Hunger twisted in Clara's gut, sharp and unforgiving, but she swallowed it down. Pride was something she'd lost the right to. She dragged herself toward the saloon, where several men smoked beneath the overhang. "Excuse me, sirs," she said, her voice raw from cold. "I'm looking for employment." "I'll sleep in the barn," she added quickly. "Just give me work. I don't need much." "Well, look at that," one man said, a heavy fellow with tobacco-stained teeth, elbowing his friend, another beggar woman. "Town's crawling with them lately. Probably shamed her family." Another man glanced at her bare hands. "No decent woman travels alone." "I'm a widow," Clara said softly. It wasn't quite true. Her husband hadn't died, he'd left. But abandonment carried worse shame than death in places like this. "Sure you are," the first man laughed. "And I'm President Grant. Move along. We don't need your kind." Heat burned in Clara's face despite the cold. She turned away before the tears could freeze on her lashes. Across the street, the livery stable stood open. Maybe there, someone might listen. Inside, the air was warm with hay and horse sweat. She found Hank Dobbs, grizzled and broad-backed, shoveling out a stall. "Sir," she said, "I'm looking for work. I'm strong. I can clean stalls, feed horses. I'll sleep in the barn if you'll let me. I don't need wages, just food and shelter." Hank barely looked up. "Can't help you. Already got a stable boy, and it wouldn't be proper for a woman to sleep in my barn." "People would talk," he added. "They already do," Clara said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, I have nowhere else." "Not my problem." He turned back to his work. The storm had worsened by the time she stumbled outside again. Her fingers were numb, useless. She forced herself toward the church at the end of town, clinging to a last shred of hope. Reverend Ezekiel Whitman stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm sorry," he said flatly. "We can't take in every stray that wanders through. The church funds are for members of our congregation." "I'll join," Clara said quickly. "I'll attend every service. I think not," he cut in. "You should return to wherever you came from." There was nowhere to return to. Her father had made that clear when her husband left. "No daughter of mine will carry that shame," he'd said, shutting the door in her face. Clara drifted back toward the center of town, her steps slow, her thoughts blurring. The cold was seeping deep now. She'd heard freezing felt peaceful, like falling asleep. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst end. Voices rose near the general store. A crowd had gathered. Clara moved toward the sound. "Don't care if he trades here regular," someone said. "Those Indians got no business walking our streets like they own them." She pushed closer and saw the reason for the noise. A man stood near the store entrance, unlike anyone she had ever seen. He was enormous, broad as a timber beam, towering over the others. His hair was long and black, worn in the Apache way. His face was carved in sharp lines, shadowed and calm. Leather leggings, a worn wool coat, boots dusted by miles of hard travel. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Dark as winter earth, they swept the crowd with quiet judgment. When they passed over Clara, something struck her. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "Joseph Burns says he saw him looking at his daughter," a woman hissed. "Savages got no control over themselves." The man did not react. He stood still, unmoved by their words, like a mountain among shouting men. And though Clara didn't yet know his name, that moment, cold, crowded, and cruel, was the first time Cale saw her too. The man, Apache, unmistakably so, stood motionless, as solid as if the earth itself had risen and taken human form. The hostility around him seemed to pass without leaving a mark, the insults no heavier than the wind cutting through the street. Clara Whitlock found herself watching him without meaning to. His clothing was clean, cared for. Nothing about him spoke of vagrancy. The hands visible beneath his coat sleeves were scarred and calloused, shaped by labor, yet steady and controlled. This was not a troublemaker. This was a man who had come into town for supplies, nothing more. "Someone ought to drive him out," a voice muttered from the crowd. "You going to try?" Another replied, forcing a laugh. "Look at the size of him." Clara's vision swam. Cold and hunger finally claimed their due. Her knees weakened, and she reached for the hitching post, but her numb fingers slipped uselessly across the frozen wood. The street tilted sharply. She fell, but she never struck the ground. Arms like iron bands closed around her, catching her weight with startling care. She looked up, dazed, into eyes dark as night. Up close, she saw they weren't black at all, but deep brown, rich and steady, like wet earth after rain. The crowd went quiet. The Apache man studied her for a heartbeat, taking in the torn dress, the pale skin bitten raw by winter, the exhaustion etched into every line of her. Without a word, he shifted his grip, one arm firm behind her back, the other sliding beneath her knees. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. "Put her down," someone shouted. "You can't just—" His gaze swept over them then, calm and unyielding. It wasn't fear that made the crowd retreat, but something colder, a recognition of something that would not be moved. He turned and began to walk. Clara knew she should protest. She knew she should demand to be released. But the heat of his body was the first real warmth she'd felt in days, and her instincts betrayed her. She curled closer, surrendering to it. "Where's he taking her?" Voices followed. "Someone stop him." "You stop him." No one did. They watched, stunned and uneasy, as the Apache giant carried the ragged white woman straight through them, parting the crowd without resistance. Clara's last clear thought, before exhaustion dragged her under, was the scent of his coat. Wood smoke and pine, clean and familiar, like a memory of home she'd thought long dead. She let her head rest against his shoulder and stopped fighting. Behind them, angry whispers erupted, but the man never looked back. He moved through the storm with quiet certainty, bearing his unexpected burden as though this moment, this woman, had been waiting for him all along. The wind screamed on, but Clara no longer heard it. Sleep claimed her, deep and merciful, carried by a stranger whose kindness asked nothing and explained nothing. Cedar Ridge would remember this day for years. The day an Apache carried off a beggar woman and shattered the town's tidy rules with a single act of compassion. But for Clara, it was only the day her life began again. She woke to warmth and the steady crackle of fire. For a moment, she lay still, disoriented. Then memory returned. The street, the fall, the arms that caught her. She opened her eyes. A cabin surrounded her, solid and well-built. Thick log walls sealed tight against the weather. Firelight flickered across the room from a stone hearth, chasing shadows along the beams. She lay on a pallet near the fire, wrapped in heavy blankets that smelled of sage and smoke. Across from her sat the Apache man, working quietly with his hands. In the glow of the flames, she saw his face more clearly. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. His hands moved with calm precision, carving wood. When she shifted, he looked up and set the piece aside. "Water," he said. His voice was deep, steady, not a question. He brought her a cup, supporting her enough to drink. The water was cool and clean, better than anything she could remember. She finished it greedily. "Thank you," she whispered, her throat raw. He nodded and turned to the pot hanging above the fire. The smell rising from it made her stomach clench painfully. He ladled stew into a bowl and brought it to her. Her hands trembled as she took it. The first bite broke her. Tears welled as she swallowed. Venison, roots, wild herbs. Simple food, but after days of near starvation, it tasted like abundance. He watched her eat, those dark eyes thoughtful, then returned to his carving. Clara studied him between bites, trying to understand. In town, they'd looked at him with hatred and suspicion. Yet he had shown her more mercy than any of them. "Why?" she asked softly when the bowl was empty. He glanced up. "Why? Why did you help me?" He was quiet for a long moment, the fire snapping between them. He answered her question at last. "You needed help." His voice was calm, steady. That was enough. Clara understood then. No questions about where she had come from. No weighing of her past, her reputation, or the mistakes that had left her alone and broken. She needed help, so he gave it. "They'll talk," she said quietly. "In town. They'll say awful things about you. About me. They already do." Kyle's tone held no anger, no bitterness. Just fact. Clara looked down at her hands, still wrapped around the empty bowl. "I have nothing," she said. "No money, no family, nothing." Her voice faltered. "I can't repay you." "I didn't ask for payment." He paused, then added, "But Storm." He nodded toward the door. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters hard enough to make the walls groan. "Stay tonight," he said. "Decide tomorrow." He took the bowl from her hands and rinsed it at the basin. Clara watched him move through the cabin with quiet purpose. Everything had its place. Tools hung neatly, supplies stacked with care, firewood laid out by the hearth. Nothing wasted, nothing careless. "What's your name?" she asked. He glanced at her. "They call me Kyle." "Is that your real name?" A faint smile touched his mouth. Real enough for a white man's town. I'm Clara, she said. Clara Whitlock. He nodded once, accepting it without comment. As the evening stretched on, the tension she'd carried for days slowly loosened its grip. Kyle worked on his carving, feeding the fire now and then. Only then did she notice he'd set a sleeping pallet for her near the hearth, while he remained on a simple stool. I can sleep in the barn, she offered. I don't mind. I've slept in worse. He shook his head. No barn. Here. Then where will you sleep? He nodded toward a bedroll in the corner. I've slept in worse too. Another gust of wind slammed against the cabin, and despite the warmth, Clara shivered. She pulled the blankets tighter, remembering the faces in town, the stares, the whispers. They think you're dangerous, she said softly. I am. There was no threat in the words, no pride, just truth. To those who would harm what's mine. The question escaped her before she could stop it. Am I yours now? Kyle looked at her fully then, his dark eyes unreadable. You belong to no one. But under my roof, you are under my protection. Her throat tightened. Protection. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had offered her that. My husband left me, she said suddenly. 8 months ago. Just vanished. The words spilled out. Left debts. Left nothing. My father said I brought shame to the family. Said a woman who couldn't keep her husband wasn't his daughter. She swallowed hard. I tried to work. Everywhere I went, they knew. Small towns always know. They knew I was the woman whose husband chose the road over her. Kyle kept carving, but she knew he was listening. I thought Cedar Ridge would be different, she went on with a bitter laugh. Bigger town, more people. I thought someone might need help badly enough not to care about my past. Her voice dropped. But it's the same everywhere. A woman alone is either pitied or suspected, never just accepted. White men's ways, Kyle said after a moment. Apache way is different. A woman alone is not shameful. Sometimes necessary. Sometimes strong. I don't feel strong. You walked 3 days through a storm. No food. No shelter. He shrugged, still standing. That is strength. Clara considered that. She'd called it desperation. He called it strength. What will people say? She asked. A white woman staying with an Apache man. Whatever they want. His voice didn't waver. Their words changed nothing. They could make trouble for you. They can try. There was something in the way he said it. Quiet, final, that told her he meant it. This was a man who had faced trouble before and survived. Another blast of wind shook the cabin. Cale rose, checked the door, and slid the bar into place. Tomorrow, he said. If the storm breaks, I go to town. Trade pelts. She nodded. You decide then, he continued. Stay or go? And if I stay? He returned to his seat and picked up his carving. Then you stay. But what would I do? She asked. I need to work. I need to earn my place. There is work, he said. Garden, mending, preparing game. He glanced at her. If you want it. Something stirred in her chest. Small, fragile, but real. Hope. Yes, Clara said quickly. Yes, I want to work. He nodded once, satisfied, and returned to his carving. They sat together in an easy silence, while the storm battered the cabin walls. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara Whitlock felt herself growing heavy with sleep. Warm, fed, and no longer afraid. Just before darkness pulled her under, she heard Cale moving quietly through the cabin, tending the fire, settling onto his bedroll. Thank you, she whispered into the shadows. Sleep. Sleep was the only answer. Clara closed her eyes, listening to the wind and the soft crack of burning wood. She thought of the people in town, their sharp tongues, their colder hearts. They had warned her about a dangerous savage. Yet here she lay, safer than she had been in months, treated with more respect than any of them had shown her. Tomorrow, she would have to choose. Go back and face their judgment, or leave Cedar Ridge entirely and become just another nameless beggar somewhere else. Or stay here in this plain cabin with a man who asked nothing of her past and offered only shelter and honest work. But tonight, she didn't have to decide. Tonight, she could rest. As sleep finally claimed her, her last clear thought was of Cale's hands as he carved, steady, patient, shaping something whole from rough wood. Maybe broken things could be made new again. Maybe she could too. The wind raged on outside, but inside the cabin, two souls found quiet refuge from the storm. One who had given shelter without being asked, and one who had nearly forgotten such kindness still existed. Morning came in silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in white. Clara woke slowly, confused for a moment by the warmth, by the unfamiliar sense of safety. Then memory returned. The Apache man, the cabin, the mercy she had thought lost to the world. She sat up. Kyle was already awake, standing by the window, watching the snow-covered land. In the pale morning light, the cabin revealed itself fully, spare but orderly. Tools hung neatly on pegs. Blankets and furs were folded with care. A rifle rested in the corner, clean and ready. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned and nodded. "Morning. Coffee?" "Yes, please." He poured from a pot warming near the fire and handed her a tin cup. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased the cold from her hands. "The storm's gone," he said. "Road to town will clear by afternoon." Her stomach tightened. The choice she had avoided all night was waiting for her now. She sipped the coffee, searching for words. Part of her knew she should leave, try again somewhere else. But a larger part, the tired part, wanted desperately to stay. Kyle moved through the cabin, preparing breakfast with the same quiet efficiency as before. He set a plate in front of her, fried bread and dried meat, simple food that made her mouth water. "Thank you," she said. It meant far more than the meal. They ate without speaking. Clara studied the cabin again, trying to picture herself here. It was nothing like the life she'd known. No fine furniture, no decoration, only a few ceremonial items on one wall. Yet it was warm, safe. And here, she was treated with dignity. "If I stay," she said at last, "what will people in town say? What will they do?" Kyle thought for a moment. "They'll talk, always talk, maybe threaten. But this is my land, my business. They could make trouble for you." "I've traded there 10 years," he said calmly. "They need my furs, my meat. Business is business." She knew he was right. Even yesterday, no one had stopped him from trading, no matter how they looked at him. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough," she admitted, "to face their judgment." "I'm not asking you to face them," he said. "I'm asking if you want work, a roof, food." He gestured to the cabin. "This isn't town." Understanding settled over her then. He wasn't asking her to endure their stares every day. This place stood apart, quiet, removed. Here she could have shelter, work, and dignity. "Yes," she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I want to stay." He nodded, as if he had expected nothing else. "Good. Much work to do." He showed her the routines of the place. Water drawn from a spring behind the cabin, protected by a small spring house he had built himself. Firewood stacked beneath a lean-to, kept dry through winter. Each task had its place. As he spoke, Clara felt something settle inside her. Not certainty, not yet, but the first solid ground she'd felt in a long time. There was a root cellar dug into the hillside for storing vegetables and preserved meat. A small shed nearby held tools and supplies. "The garden's there," Kyle said, pointing to a cleared patch now buried beneath snow. "When spring comes, it needs planting. You know garden work?" "Yes," Clara Whitlock answered, then hesitated. "I kept a kitchen garden once." She let the thought fade, back when she still had a home, a husband, a life. "Yes, I know how." "Good." He nodded. "Trap line also needs checking. I can teach you how to skin and prepare pelts." Clara nodded, even though the idea turned her stomach. She had asked for work. She wouldn't be particular now. The day slipped by faster than she expected. Kyle showed her where everything belonged, explained the way he did things. There was order to it all. Clear, deliberate, nothing wasted. She found herself quietly impressed. This wasn't some crude shelter. It was a home, carefully kept. As afternoon wore on, Kyle pulled on his heavy coat. "I need supplies," he said. "I'll be back before dark." "Should I?" she began. "Is there anything you want me to do while you're gone?" "Rest," he replied. "You're still weak from the cold. Work can wait until tomorrow." He paused at the door and looked back at her. "Bar the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone." A chill slid down her spine. "Are you expecting trouble?" "No," he said evenly, "but caution is wise." After he left, Clara dropped the heavy bar into place. The cabin felt different without him. Smaller somehow, yet too quiet. She moved through it slowly, growing familiar with the space that might become hers. Home. The word felt strange on her tongue. She spotted his carving from the night before, resting on a shelf. A bird, wings spread in mid-flight. The detail was remarkable. Every feather shaped with care. She traced it with her fingers, awed by the patience it must have taken. Time dragged. She tended the fire, then fetched water and washed properly for the first time in weeks. When she caught her reflection in a small mirror, she winced. Her face looked hollow. Her hair was matted and dull. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had lived rough. She was trying to comb out the worst tangles when she heard horses. Her heart slammed hard against her ribs. She moved to the window and peered out. 3 riders stood in the yard. She recognized one immediately. Sheriff Cole Granger. The other 2 were strangers, but their posture told her enough. The way they watched the cabin, alert and measuring. "Come out of there," Granger called. "We know you're inside, woman. Saw the Apache ride off." Clara stayed silent, Cale's warning echoing in her mind. "Don't make this hard," Granger went on. "We're here to help you. Take you back where you belong." Her hands trembled, but she didn't move. "Don't be a fool," one of the men called. "You really think that savage means you any good? You're just a toy to him." "Go away," Clara said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I'm fine where I am." "You don't know what you're saying," another man argued. "Those people know how to twist a woman's mind." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she shot back. "Now leave. This is private property." Granger laughed, harsh and ugly. "Property? You think the law recognizes an Indian's claim to land? Open this door or we'll open it for you." Panic surged. The door was solid, barred, but 3 men could force it if they tried. She moved toward Cale's rifle, then froze. She didn't know how to use it. Even if she did, could she pull the trigger? Last chance, Granger warned. Come out peaceful. A rifle cracked through the air, not from inside the cabin, but from somewhere beyond the yard. The horses reared and stamped. That's far enough, gentlemen. Clara knew the voice instantly. Cale's, hard and edged with something she hadn't heard before. Now, Cale, Granger began, forcing a laugh. We're just trying to help the lady. She's clearly not thinking straight, living out here with... She's made her choice, Cale said. You will respect it. Or what? Granger sneered. You'll shoot a sheriff? That's a hanging offense. Self-defense is not a crime, Kyle replied evenly. You are on my land, threatening my guest. Leave, now. Clara Whitlock looked out the window again. Kyle stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle held steady, his posture relaxed but ready. Even from a distance, she could see it, the calm certainty of a man who did not bluff. This isn't finished, Sheriff Cole Granger called. There are laws about white women and Indians, moral laws, if nothing else. You're poisoning her, he went on, and the decent people of Cedar Ridge won't allow it. The decent people of Cedar Ridge let her starve in their streets, Cale answered evenly. Their morality has no weight here. The truth of it landed hard. Granger's face flushed, but he turned his horse. You'll regret this. Both of you. Mark my words. The riders wheeled away. Only when they were gone did Clara's knees give, relief rushing through her. She hurried to unbar the door. Cale stepped inside, set his rifle back in its place, and studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You stayed, he said. You told me to bar the door, Clara replied, and not open it for anyone. A faint smile crossed his face. Good. He set a pack on the table and began unpacking. Supplies, and this. He drew out a bundle of fabric. For you. Dress needs mending, but it's warm. Clara unfolded it. A simple wool dress, sturdy and plain. Tears filled her eyes. I can't pay you. I already said, he replied. I'm not asking for payment. Winter needs clothes. This is practical. She pressed the dress to her chest, overwhelmed. Even this, after months of cold indifference, felt almost unbearable. They'll come back, she said quietly. Maybe, he answered, unpacking flour, salt, coffee, ammunition. Change is never quiet. Why are you doing this? She asked at last. Really? He paused, then spoke without looking up. Long ago, my mother was cast out, married a white trapper against tribal law. When he died, she had nowhere. Apache wouldn't help. White men wouldn't either. His voice remained steady. She starved when I was 12 winters. Clara's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Not your fault, he said. But I remember how they looked at her, like she was nothing. I remember begging anyone to help. He resumed his work. You needed help. I could give it. It wasn't simple, but he said it as if it were. And sitting there, warm and fed, Clara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Thank you, she said again, knowing the words were small. He nodded once. Tomorrow, work begins. Tonight you rest. Real rest. As evening settled and they shared another plain meal, Clara thought of the men who had come, their threats, their judgments. In town, she had been a nuisance, a problem. Here, she was a guest. Tomorrow, she would be a worker. That was enough, for now. 2 weeks passed in uneasy peace. Clara slipped into the rhythm of cabin life, finding comfort in routine. She mended clothing, cooked meals, learned to check the nearer trap lines. Her hands toughened, growing capable where they had once been soft. The whispers began on Cale's next trip to town. He returned later than usual, his expression darker. He dropped his pack with more force than necessary. "What happened?" Clara asked, pausing in her work over a rabbit pelt. "Nothing important," he said. But the tension in his jaw told another story. She didn't press. She had learned he spoke when he was ready. That night, over supper, he finally said it. "They're calling you names." Her hand stilled on her cup. "What names?" "It doesn't matter." "Tell me." She met his eyes. "Barn rat," he said. "Said you'd sleep anywhere for food, like an animal." Her cheeks burned, not with guilt, but shame imposed by others. Kyle's gaze stayed steady. "Small words," he added, "from frightened people." Clara swallowed, lifting her chin. She had survived worse than words. Not anger. That wasn't what burned in her chest. Because hadn't she said the same things herself? Hadn't Clara Whitlock begged to sleep in barns, anywhere out of the wind? They were also calling her ruined now, saying no decent man would have her, not after she chose to live out here with an Apache. "They're not wrong," she said quietly. "I am ruined. My husband left me. My family turned me away. I begged in their streets." Her voice stayed level, but every word cut. "And now I live with a man who isn't my husband. By their rules, I'm already lost." Kyle's eyes flashed. "Their rules mean nothing. You work. You harm no one. That is not ruin." But the damage had already taken hold. The peace she'd found began to fracture. She caught herself imagining the people in town, their looks, their whispers. When she studied her reflection, she saw what they saw. A fallen woman. Someone without standing, without worth. The next day brought proof. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard horses. Her stomach sank as several women rode into view, stopping at the edge of the clearing. Among them was Abigail Morrison, the general store owner's wife. None of them dismounted. "Clara Whitlock," Abigail called, her voice heavy with judgment. "We've come to appeal to whatever decency remains in you." Clara forced herself to step closer, though every instinct urged her to run. "You're living in sin," one woman said bluntly. "Openly, shamelessly, with a heathen." "Have you no concern for your soul?" another demanded. "I'm working," Clara said. "Honestly, there's no sin in honest work." Abigail laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "Work? Is that what you call it? We know what kind of work a woman does for a man she isn't married to." "It's not like that." "Then marry him," a younger woman challenged. "If it's so innocent, make it proper." Abigail recoiled. Marry an Indian? That would be worse. At least now she could repent. Leave. Salvage what little reputation you have left. "There's nothing left to salvage," Clara said, bitterness surprising even her. "You made that clear when you let me starve in your streets." "Akar, because you couldn't keep your husband," Abigail snapped. "That should have told you to examine your own failures, not add to them." Kyle stepped out of the cabin then. The horses shifted nervously. "Ladies," he said, his tone polite but cold, "you're not welcome here." "We're trying to save her soul," Abigail replied, backing her horse away. "Her soul is her concern." Kyle said, "Leave." "Or what?" One woman scoffed. "You'll scalp us?" Kyle looked at her. She went pale. "This isn't finished," Abigail said tightly. "The decent people of Cedar Ridge won't stand by while white women are corrupted. We'll pray for you, Clara. Pray you come to your senses." They rode off in a storm of righteous outrage, leaving Clara shaking. "Don't listen to them," Kyle said. But she already had. Their words lodged beneath her skin like splinters. That night, she barely ate. The harassment grew worse. Every trip Cale made to town brought new rumors, each crueler than the last. They said she'd bewitched him, that she carried his half-breed child, that she sold herself for food and shelter. Then came the night visits. The first time, it was only voices in the dark, shouted insults and laughter. Cale grabbed his rifle, but the riders vanished before he reached them. A week later, stones crashed against the cabin walls. One shattered the small window, glass spraying across the floor. "Ignore them," Kyle said as he boarded it up. "Cowards, brave only in darkness." But Clara couldn't ignore it. Each incident frayed her nerves. She jumped at every sound, watched the tree line, waited. Then came the night that changed everything. She woke to pounding on the door, violent enough to rattle the frame. "Open up," Sheriff Cole Granger's voice barked. "I've got a warrant for the woman. Suspicion of theft and prostitution." Cale was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "There's no theft here. No prostitution. Go away." "Can't do that, Cale," Sheriff Cole Granger answered from outside. "Got legal papers. She comes with us, or we come in and get her." "Show the papers through the window," Cale demanded. "Don't need to show you a damn thing, Indian. Open this door, or we'll break it down." Clara Whitlock clutched her shawl tighter, her heart hammering. "Maybe I should go," she whispered. "If they have papers—" "No papers," Kyle said firmly. "They lie. No judge would sign a warrant like that without proof." The pounding grew louder. She could hear more voices now, 4, maybe 5 men. "Last chance, Cale," Granger called. "Send her out and we leave peaceful. Keep her and things turn ugly." Cale moved to the window, peering out. His jaw tightened. "They brought rope," he said quietly. The word struck Clara like a blow. Rope. She knew exactly what that meant. 10 seconds, Granger warned. "Then we come in." Kyle turned to her, and in his eyes she saw fear. For her, not himself. "Back room," he said. "Bar the door. No matter what you hear, don't come out." "No, Kyle, go." She ran. The small back room was barely more than storage. She dropped the bar into place just as the front door splintered. The sounds that followed burned themselves into her memory. Shouting, crashing wood, the sickening thud of fists on flesh. Kyle's rifle fired once, then clattered to the floor. More violence, furniture breaking. Then silence. "Where is she?" Granger's voice, breathless. "Hit him again. Make him talk." A blow landed. Still, Cale said nothing. Clara pressed her hands over her mouth, choking back a sob. Every instinct screamed to run to him, but his words held her frozen. The back room handle rattled. "Barred from inside," someone said. "Clara Whitlock," Granger called. "Come out now and we'll go easy on you. Make us break this door and I can't promise what happens." She stayed silent, barely breathing. "Your Indian can't protect you now," Granger continued. "We've got him tied up good, still breathing. You come out peaceful, he stays that way." The threat hung heavy. Clara closed her eyes. She couldn't let them hurt him because of her. Slowly, she reached for the bar. Then a new voice cut through the cabin, sharp, commanding. "What in the name of God Almighty is going on here?" Granger's tone shifted. Judge Samuel Hartwell, sir. We were just..." "Breaking and entering, from what I can see," the judge interrupted. "Assault as well. Did you say you had a warrant?" Well, not exactly. Then you are here illegally, Judge Hartwell snapped. Attacking a man in his own home. Cut him loose, immediately. But sir, the woman. What woman? The judge said coldly. I see a man defending his property from criminals. Unless you have legal papers, you are the ones breaking the law. Clara heard scrambling, curses under breath. This isn't over, Granger muttered. Yes, it is, Judge Hartwell replied. Any man I find out here again without lawful cause will be prosecuted fully. Now get out before I have you arrested. Only when she heard horses retreating did Clara emerge. Kyle sat on the floor, blood running from a cut above his eye. Rope burns marked his wrists. Judge Hartwell stood nearby, an older man with stern eyes. You all right, miss? He asked. Clara nodded, unable to speak, dropping beside Kyle. I'll be going, the judge said. Kyle, you might consider certain legal arrangements. They solve many problems. He tipped his hat and left. Clara cleaned Kyle's wounds with shaking hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. This is my fault. I'll leave tomorrow. His hand caught hers. No. You stay. But they'll come back. They will, he said quietly. Then we face them together. She looked at him through tears, this man who owed her nothing, who had taken a beating rather than surrender her. Why? She asked again. This time his answer was different. Because you are not nothing, not barn rat, not ruined. His voice softened. You're Clara. You work hard, you don't complain, you make good coffee. A faint smile touched his mouth. Worth fighting for? She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder, and cried. Not from despair, but from relief. From gratitude. From the fragile beginning of hope. Dawn crept in pale and quiet. They had survived the night. Whatever came next, they would face it, as Kyle had said, together. The days after the attack were still, but it was the kind of stillness that held tension, like clouds stacked high on the horizon. Clara Whitlock threw herself into work, trying to bury the memory of that night beneath routine. There was comfort in simple tasks. Cooking, mending, learning the skills Cale taught with steady patience. He began showing her how to work pelts, how to scrape and stretch them without tearing the hide. Her hands fumbled at first, but Cale never scolded. He only demonstrated again, calm and precise. During those evenings, she noticed something else. His carving had changed. After supper, he would sit by the fire, knife moving with greater focus, shaping the wood into forms she couldn't quite see in the flicker of flame. What are you making? She asked one night, curiosity finally winning. He glanced up, then held the piece out to her. A small bird, a sparrow, wings folded tight, head tucked as if bracing against cold wind. It's beautiful, she said, tracing the delicate feathers. But why a sparrow? Small bird, he replied. Common. People think nothing of it. He took the carving back, studying it. But it survives winter when bigger birds fly south, stronger than it looks. Clara understood then. He wasn't just carving wood. He was carving how he saw her. The realization tightened her throat. As the weeks passed, more figures appeared. A rabbit, alert and ready to bolt. A deer, worn but graceful. A lone wolf, lean, proud, unbroken. Cale never said they were for her, yet she always found them placed near her. By the wash basin, beside her mending, close to her sleeping pallet. You could sell these, she said one day, admiring an eagle carved with astonishing detail. In town, to traders passing through. He shrugged. Maybe. Not why I make them. Then why? He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. At last he said, "My grandfather taught me. Said wood holds spirits, waiting. Carver's job is to find them, set them free." He looked at her. Sometimes a person needs to see their own spirit outside themselves. Remember what they are. That night, Clara studied the carvings by firelight. Each was different, but all shared a quiet strength, endurance without noise. Was this how Cale saw her? Not broken, not ruined. Something worth patience and care. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was working in the small garden plot Cale had helped her clear when she heard a horse. Her body tensed, ready to run. But it was only one rider, a woman. She recognized her as Ruth Calder, the schoolteacher, young, plain-faced, with kind eyes. "Miss Whitlock," Ruth called, staying mounted. "May I speak with you?" Clara approached carefully. "If you've come to save my soul or convince me to leave, I came to apologize," Ruth interrupted, "and to warn you." The honesty startled her. Clara studied Ruth's face, finding only sincerity and fear. "Warn me about what?" Ruth glanced around. "May we talk inside? I don't want to be seen here long." They went into the cabin. Clara poured coffee for them both. "I was there," Ruth said quietly. "The day you came to town. I saw you begging for work. I saw how they treated you. I said nothing." Her hands tightened together. "I've regretted it ever since." "Why didn't you help?" Clara asked. "Because I'm a coward," Ruth said. "Because I need my position. A schoolteacher who shows poor judgment, who associates with the wrong people, she's dismissed in a heartbeat. And then I'd be where you were." Clara felt anger spark, then fade. She understood that fear too well. "You said you came to warn me," she said. "Yes." Ruth leaned forward. "There's talk in town, ugly talk. Some of the men, led by Sheriff Cole Granger, are saying Cale has you under some kind of spell, that you're not responsible for your actions. They're petitioning to have you removed for your own good. Judge Samuel Hartwell already stopped them," Clara said. "He's only here twice a month," Ruth replied. "The rest of the time, Granger and his friends do as they please. They're gaining support. Even people who didn't care before. They're calling it protection," Ruth added softly. "White womanhood, Christian values." Cold seeped through Clara despite the warm coffee. "What should I do?" "I don't know," Ruth admitted. Then she hesitated and pulled a small cloth bundle from her bag. "I brought this. It isn't much." Inside were needles, good thread, sharp scissors, and several yards of sturdy fabric. "I can't accept this," Clara said. Ruth stood abruptly. "It doesn't erase my cowardice," she said. "But maybe it helps." She moved toward the door. "I should go, before someone sees my horse." Left alone again, Clara stared at the bundle in her hands, knowing the storm was far from over. At the door, Ruth Calder paused. "He's a good man," she said quietly. "Cale. I've watched him trade in town for years. He never cheats, never causes trouble, no matter how they treat him." She met Clara Whitlock's eyes. "You could do far worse than a man who sees your worth when the rest of the world refuses to." After Ruth left, Clara sat staring at the sewing supplies. Such a small kindness. Yet it reminded her that not everyone in Cedar Ridge was against her. It sparked an idea. When Cale returned from checking his trap lines, she showed him the fabric. "I want to make something," she said. "Something to sell. If I can bring in real money, maybe they'll see I'm not just what they think I am." Cale studied her face. You want their approval? I want them to leave us alone, she corrected. And money speaks louder than gossip. He nodded slowly. What would you make? Shirts, proper ones. The men in town, their wives don't sew well. I noticed loose seams, poor stitching. I can do better. It was true. Her mother had once insisted she learn fine needlework, back when there had been hopes of a respectable marriage. The skill had felt useless then. Now it might save her. Kyle helped her set up a workspace near the window where the light was strongest. As she worked on the first shirt, he sat nearby, carving. This time, she could clearly see what he was shaping. A woman bent over her sewing, caught in a moment of focus. That's me, Clara said softly, surprised. Yes. I don't look afraid. Because you're not, he replied. Not when you work. When you work, you remember who you are. She thought about that as her needle moved steadily through the fabric. He was right. When she worked, she wasn't the abandoned wife or the beggar woman. She was simply Clara, making something useful with her own hands. By evening, the shirt was finished. Clean seams, even stitches. Well fitted. Cale examined it with the same care he gave his carvings. Good, he said simply. But she saw approval in his eyes. That night, as they ate, Clara found herself thinking about Judge Samuel Hartwell's words. Legal arrangements. She knew what he'd meant. Marriage would protect her in the eyes of the law. It would make it harder for Sheriff Cole Granger and his allies to interfere. Marriage to an Apache. Months ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now, she watched Cale tend the fire. His quiet strength, the way he had stood between her and harm, the way he had taken blows rather than surrender her. Cale, she said suddenly, what did the judge mean? About legal arrangements? He went still. Then he turned to face her. You know? Yes. But is it even legal? For us to... Legal, yes. Accepted, no. He sat across from her. It might cause more trouble. Or solve it. Hard to say. What do you think? He was silent for a long moment, knife resting in his hand. I think you deserve a man who offers marriage because he wants you, not because the law makes it convenient. Heat rose to her cheeks. And you don't want... I didn't say that. His dark eyes held hers. I said you deserve better than marriage offered as protection only. The air between them grew heavy. Clara became suddenly aware of him. The way he moved, the rare smiles that softened his stern face, the gentleness of hands strong enough to break bone. What if it wasn't just for protection? She asked, barely above a whisper. Kyle set his carving aside and gave her his full attention. Then it would be a different question. Before she could answer, the sound of horses cut through the night. Multiple riders. Fast. Kyle was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Stay inside, he ordered, moving to the window. But Clara recognized the voice that rang out. Sheriff Cole Granger again, and he wasn't alone. We know you're in there, Granger called. Both of you. Come out now and nobody gets hurt. Cale checked his rifle, grim. They don't learn. Wait, Clara said, a thought forming. Let me try something. Before he could stop her, she grabbed the finished shirt and moved to the door. I'm coming out, she called. Don't shoot. I just want to talk. She stepped onto the porch, holding the shirt up like a flag of truce. In the torchlight, she saw at least 8 men, Granger among them, along with several town merchants. Gentlemen, she said, proud that her voice didn't shake. I have a business proposition. They stayed mounted, torches throwing wild shadows across their faces. Granger's expression shifted from triumph to confusion as Clara stood before them, holding up the carefully sewn shirt. Business? He spat. The only business here is removing you from this den of sin. Look at this shirt, Clara Whitlock said, ignoring Sheriff Cole Granger's sneer. She stepped farther into the torchlight so they could see it clearly. Look at the stitching, the cut, the quality. Despite themselves, several of the men leaned forward. She recognized Owen Fletcher, who owned the feed store, and Luke Harlan, the blacksmith. So you can sew, Granger said dismissively. What of it? How many of you have wives who struggle with fine needlework? Clara pressed on. How many of you pay high prices to order shirts from Denver or San Francisco? I can make better ones, faster and for less. We don't need anything from you, one man called out. But Owen Fletcher was already studying the shirt with a merchant's practiced eye. That is fine work, he admitted grudgingly. I'm offering to take orders, Clara continued. Proper business, honest arrangements. I want paid work, nothing more. She's trying to trick us, Granger snapped. Distract us from why we're here. And what exactly is that? Kyle's voice came from behind her. He stood in the doorway, rifle held loosely but ready. You have legal papers this time? Granger's face darkened. Don't need papers to protect a white woman from corruption. I'm not corrupted, Clara said firmly. I work for room and board, and now I'm offering my labor for wages. Since when is honest work a sin? Since you're living in sin with a heathen, someone shouted. Clara felt heat rush through her. For weeks she had swallowed their judgment, let shame hollow her out. But standing there, holding proof of her skill with Cale solid behind her, something shifted. You know what is a sin? She said, her voice rising. Letting a woman starve in your streets because her husband abandoned her. Turning away someone begging for work because she doesn't carry a man's name to make her respectable. She swept her gaze across them. Your hearts are so hard you'd rather see me dead than helped by someone you think beneath you. Watch your tongue, Granger warned. Or what? Clara shot back. You'll drag me off and beat me like you beat Cale? Show everyone what good Christian men you are? She laughed, bitter and sharp. You call him savage, but he showed me more humanity in one day than your whole town showed me in a week. Clara, Kyle said quietly. A warning. She was pushing too far. Then Luke Harlan dismounted, approaching slowly. Let me see that shirt closer. She handed it to him. He examined it by torchlight, fingers tracing the seams. Luke was known for practicality. Quality mattered more to him than gossip. This is better than what my wife makes, he admitted. And better than what we get from traveling merchants. How much? Luke, you can't be serious, Granger protested. I need shirts, Luke said flatly. Good ones. If she can make them, I don't care where she sleeps. $2 per shirt, Clara said. $1 for simple work shirts. That's Denver prices, someone objected. For Denver quality, Clara replied. And faster delivery. A murmur rippled through the group. These were merchants, men who understood profit better than sermons. This is madness, Granger said coldly. You're all being fooled. A woman who pays her way and a man who keeps his word. Luke cut in. That's more than some white men in this town can claim. The tension tightened. Clara realized she was watching the group fracture. Prejudice on one side, practicality on the other. I'll take 2 shirts, Luke announced. "One black for church, one gray for business." "Luca!" Granger stared at him. "It's business," Luke replied. He turned to Clara. "When can you have them ready?" 2 weeks, she said, barely believing it. "I might be interested too," Owen Fletcher added slowly, "if the quality holds." "This changes nothing," Granger said, his voice low with threat. "You're still a stain on this community. One way or another, you'll be gone." "That's enough," a new voice said. A horse stepped into the torchlight. Judge Samuel Hartwell rode forward, his expression severe. Clara wondered how long he had been listening from the dark. "Sheriff Granger," the judge said, "are you threatening citizens?" "We're concerned townsfolk," Granger replied stiffly, "who seem to have forgotten that harassment is illegal." The judge said sharply, "No matter how righteous you imagine yourselves." He glanced at Luke Harlan and Owen Fletcher. "I see lawful commerce, not corruption." The night went very quiet, but as far as I can see, Judge Samuel Hartwell said evenly, "Ms. Clara Whitlock is employed here as a housekeeper and seamstress. Unless you have evidence of illegal activity, I suggest you leave these people to their business." Sheriff Cole Granger's face twisted with fury, but he knew better than to openly challenge the judge. "This isn't over," he said, spitting the words like a curse. "No," Judge Hartwell replied mildly. "It isn't, because if I hear of any more midnight raids on this property, I'll be filing charges. Are we clear?" The men began to scatter. Luke Harlan promised to return in daylight with measurements and specific requests. Owen Fletcher nodded, already calculating costs and timelines. As the riders disappeared into the dark, Judge Hartwell lingered a moment longer. "That was cleverly handled, Ms. Whitlock," he said. "But Granger is right about one thing. This won't end here. He'll look for other ways to make trouble." "Then what should we do?" Clara asked. The judge's gaze moved between her and Cale. "What I suggested before still stands. Legal protection has its advantages." He tipped his hat. "Good evening to you both." When he was gone, Clara and Cale stood in the doorway, watching the last torchlight fade into the night. "You took a big risk," Cale said at last. "I'm tired of being afraid," Clara replied. "Tired of letting them shame me just for surviving." He was silent for a moment. "You spoke well, like a warrior." "I didn't feel like one," she admitted. "I was terrified." "The best warriors are," Cale said calmly. "Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive." They went back inside. The cabin felt different now. Stronger, as if her defiance had settled into the walls. Clara picked up the fabric Ruth Calder had brought, already planning the shirts she would make. "Will they really let me work?" she asked. "Or will Granger find a way to stop it?" "Some will trade," Cale said. "Men like Harlan care about quality and profit. Others—" He shrugged. "Granger feeds on hate. He won't stop easily." Clara ran her fingers over the cloth, thinking. "Cale, about what the judge said. About legal protection." He looked at her steadily. "You want protection?" "I want—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "When I stood up to them tonight, you were behind me, not speaking for me, not shielding me like I was weak, just there, solid." She met his eyes. "I've never had that before. Someone who believes I'm strong enough to fight, but stands ready if I need them." "You are strong enough," Kyle said simply. "I knew it the day I saw you in town. Beaten down, but not broken. Like a bird with a wounded wing, needs time to heal, then flies again." "Is that why you helped me?" she asked softly. Because you saw something worth saving? No. He stepped closer, his dark eyes intent. I helped because it was right. I stayed because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because you look at me and don't see a savage. You see Cale. And you don't look at me and see a ruined woman? She whispered. You see Clara? Not ruined, he said firmly. Never ruined. Hurt, yes. Lost for a time. But gold isn't ruined by fire. It comes out purer. Tears burned her eyes. I'm not gold. You are you, Cale replied. That is enough, more than enough. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. Clara thought again of the judge's suggestion, but now it meant more than protection. Not just shelter, but partnership. Not just survival, but home. If we... She stopped, steadying herself. If we married, it wouldn't be only for protection. Not for me. Kyle was very still. Then what would it be for? For mornings working side by side, she said quietly. For evenings by the fire. For someone who sees me fully and doesn't turn away. She drew a breath. For love, though I barely dare say the word yet. Love grows, Kyle said softly. Like a garden. Needs tending, patience, time. But the roots are already there, waiting for spring. It wasn't a declaration of passion, but it felt deeper, like a promise. Is that a yes? Clara asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Is that a proper proposal? Cale countered, and she was startled and delighted to see a smile answer hers. I suppose it isn't, she laughed. How do Apache men propose? Different ways, he said. Always with a gift, something made, hunted or grown, shows the ability to provide. Clara looked around the cabin, at the pelts, the stored vegetables, the carvings shaped by his hands. Then she looked down at the shirt she held. Then I'll make you something, she decided. The finest shirt in the territory. And when it's finished, I'll ask the right way. Cale inclined his head, solemn. Then I will answer the right way. They stood there for a long moment. Two people who had met at the far edges of society, discovering that the margins were not only places of exile, but places where freedom could take root. Outside, the night still carried threats and judgment. Inside there was warmth, work, and a growing certainty that some things broken could be mended, even strengthened at the seams. Clara picked up her needle and began to plan. She would sew proper shirts, prove herself as a tradeswoman. But first, she would make Cale's shirt. Every stitch would be a promise. Every seam, a quiet declaration that she was no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. She was exactly where she belonged. The November wind howled like a living creature. Rattling the windows, Kyle had reinforced with extra boards. For 3 days the storm had raged, turning the world beyond the cabin into a white, shifting blur. Clara worked by lamplight, her fingers steady on the fine linen she had purchased with her first honest earnings. Kyle's shirt was nearly finished. She had labored over every seam, every buttonhole, determined that nothing about it would be careless. It was the best work she had ever done. Practical, yet elegant, shaped by patience and intention. The storm's worsening, Cale said, feeding more wood into the fire. Ice crystals clung to his hair from a brief trip outside to check the animals. We have enough supplies, Clara replied, not looking up. Yes, I planned for this. He sat across from her, picking up a piece of antler he'd been carving. Early storm, not unexpected. They had grown used to silence, but this was different. Comfortable, shared, wrapping around them like another blanket. Clara stole glances at him as she worked, watching how the firelight traced his features, how his hands moved with quiet precision over the antler. "What are you making?" she asked. He held it up. "A hair comb, for a wedding gift." Her needle paused mid-stitch. "Whose wedding?" His eyes met hers, dark and steady. "Ours, when you ask properly." Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she smiled. "Presumptuous." "Practical," he replied. "Storm gives time to prepare." They worked on as the wind screamed outside. At last, Clara finished the final buttonhole. She lifted the shirt and studied it. It was beautiful, the sort of garment a respected merchant or even a judge might wear, made for a man who deserved regard. "It's finished," she said softly. Kyle set aside his carving and stepped closer. His fingers traced the collar and cuffs, examining her work with the care he gave to anything that mattered. "Very fine," he said. "Not too fine," Clara replied, holding it up against him. "Just right. For the man who gave me shelter when the world turned away. Who taught me I wasn't ruined, only tested. Who sees me as Clara, not as the names others gave me." A violent gust shook the cabin. Something crashing outside, likely a fallen branch. Cale turned toward the door. "We should—" He stopped. Another sound cut through the storm. Voices. Cale reached for his rifle, but Clara caught his arm. "That's Ruth," she said quickly. "The schoolteacher." Cale opened the door with care. Ruth Calder stumbled inside, half frozen, supporting another woman Clara did not recognize. The woman was young, heavily pregnant, barely conscious. "Please," Ruth gasped. "She needs help. The baby, it's coming." They moved at once. Kyle carried the woman to Clara's pallet by the fire, while Clara helped Ruth out of her frozen cloak. "What happened?" Clara asked, pulling blankets close. "This is Eliza Whitman," Ruth said through chattering teeth. "Reverend Whitman's daughter. She was cast out. Her husband died last month in a mining accident. When her father learned she was with child, he said she must have sinned before marriage. He turned her out." A sharp, familiar anger flared in Clara's chest. The same man who had once refused her shelter. "I've been hiding her," Ruth continued, "but she went into labor. I couldn't deliver a baby alone, and no one in town would help. They said she made her choices. I remembered you. I thought you wouldn't turn us away." "You thought right," Clara said firmly. "Cale, we need hot water. Clean cloths, now." As Cale moved to help, Eliza's eyes fluttered open. "No," she moaned weakly. "Don't let my scandal ruin you too." "Hush," Clara said softly, brushing damp hair from Eliza's forehead. "You're safe here. We're going to help you and your baby." The hours that followed were hard and unrelenting. Clara had assisted with births before, in another life, but never like this. Never while a winter storm clawed at the walls and the wind screamed like something alive. Outside, snow and darkness ruled. Inside, another kind of storm unfolded as Eliza labored. Ruth proved steadier than Clara had expected, following instructions without hesitation. Kyle kept the fire blazing, water hot, moving with quiet certainty whenever he was needed. His calm anchored them all. "I'm scared," Eliza whispered between contractions. "We're here," Clara answered firmly. "You're not alone." "They said I'm cursed," Eliza sobbed, "that my child will be marked by sin. The only marks your baby will have," Clara said fiercely, "are the ones left by love. Anyone who says otherwise is a fool." As dawn crept closer and the storm finally began to loosen its grip, Eliza's son came into the world, strong, perfect, and loud. He's beautiful. Ruth breathed as Clara cleaned the baby and wrapped him carefully. Eliza wept as she held her son close. I have nothing. No home, no family, no way to care for him. Clara looked to Cale. No words passed between them, but understanding did. Cale gave a slight nod. You have shelter here as long as you need it, Clara said. The barn is warm and dry. We can fix it properly. You're a widow, not a sinner, she continued, and your boy deserves a chance. But people will talk, Eliza whispered. They already talk, Clara replied evenly. Hasn't killed us yet. Ruth watched them with open amazement. You'd really do this? Take in a stranger and her baby? Someone took me in when I was a stranger, Clara said, glancing at Kyle. Seems only right to pass the kindness on. They spent the rest of the day making arrangements. Kyle and Ruth worked together to prepare a livable space in the barn. Solid, sheltered, warmer than it had any right to be. Clara stayed with Eliza and the baby, making sure both were resting and safe. As evening fell, Ruth prepared to leave. I have to return before they notice I'm gone, she said. But I'll come when I can. I'll bring supplies. Be careful, Clara warned. Ruth lifted her chin. If they find out I helped, I'll face it. I'm tired of being a coward. Watching you stand your ground, it's changed me. After Ruth rode off, Clara found Kyle outside, surveying the storm's damage. Big decision, he said quietly, taking them in. Are you angry? Clara asked. I should have asked first. Kyle turned to her, not angry, proud. You see need, you help, same as I did. We'll have a full household now, Clara said softly. A cast-out widow, her child, an Apache man, and a fallen woman. What will people say? Kyle's rare smile appeared. Let them talk. We know truth. Good people helping each other. Nothing shameful in that. That night, while Eliza and her baby slept safely in the barn, Clara and Cale sat by the fire. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside clean and white. I have something for you, Clara said, retrieving the shirt she had made. My proposal gift. Kyle accepted it solemnly, examining every stitch. Very fine work, he said. Work of a woman who takes pride in who it's for. Clara corrected. Kyle set the shirt aside with care, then brought out his own gift, the finished antler comb, polished smooth and carved with delicate vines and flowers. For your hair, he said quietly. When we stand before the judge, Clara took it with trembling hands. It's beautiful. You haven't asked the question yet, Kyle reminded her gently. Clara set the comb down and took his hands, calloused from labor, gentle in their hold. Cale, she said formally, will you marry me? Not for protection, not for propriety, but because you showed me broken things can be mended, because you see me truly and don't turn away, because I want to face whatever comes with you beside me. Yes, he said simply, I will marry you, Clara Whitlock, because you are strong like the mountain, because you see Cale, not Apache, because winter is warmer with you here. They sat hand in hand as the fire crackled. From the barn came the brief cry of a newborn, then quiet again. New life in the heart of winter. Hope in the middle of hardship. When? Clara asked. Soon, Cale said. Before more storms come. Judge Samuel Hartwell returns next week. People will be furious, Clara said. Sheriff Cole Granger, the others. They'll cause trouble. Yes, Cale agreed calmly. but we face it together. You, me, Eliza, little Noah. We make our own family, our own way. Clara considered the unlikely household they were forming, all of them cast aside in one way or another. Yet together, they were stronger than any of them had been alone. She imagined the shock that would ripple through Cedar Ridge folk when they learned she was not only marrying Cale, but also sheltering another disgraced woman and her child. "Let them rage," Clara said at last. "We'll be too busy living to notice." Cale squeezed her hands, his touch warm and steady. "This is good decision. No regrets," Clara said firmly. "Only gratitude. For the storm that led me to your door. For your kindness that saved my life. For this chance to build something new." The wind had gone completely still, leaving the land hushed beneath fresh snow. Tomorrow would bring challenges, Eliza's needs, the town's reaction, the hurried preparations for a wedding no one there had ever expected. But tonight, inside the cabin's warmth, with a newborn sleeping nearby and promises already exchanged, Clara felt something she had not known in years: peace. She was no longer running, no longer ashamed, no longer alone. She was home, and soon she would be the wife of a man who valued her strength as much as her skill, who offered partnership instead of ownership. The storm had passed, and in its wake it had left not ruin, but transformation. A family forged by choice, not blood, stronger for having endured together. Dawn broke cold and clear on Clara's wedding day. She stood by the window, watching sunlight spill over the snow-covered mountains, turning them gold. In the span of 3 days, her world had shifted entirely. Word of the marriage had spread through Cedar Ridge like fire through dry grass, and the response had been swift and predictable. "They're coming," Cale said quietly behind her. She saw them then, riders moving through the pale morning mist. "Who?" Clara asked. "Sheriff Cole Granger," Cale replied, "and others." Eliza stepped from the barn, Noah bundled tight against her chest. "This is because of me too," she said anxiously. "I should leave." "No," Clara said at once. "You stay. We face this together." Kyle checked his rifle, then deliberately set it aside. "No guns. Not today." Clara understood. Today was for joining, not bloodshed. She smoothed her dress, not the white gown she had once dreamed of, but a good wool dress Cale had bought for her. Clean, warm, carefully mended by her own hands. The riders stopped at the edge of the property. Sheriff Granger dismounted, his face tight with righteous fury. "Clara Whitlock," he called, "we're here to give you one last chance to see reason." Clara stepped onto the porch. Cale stood beside her, Eliza just behind. "State your business, Sheriff," Clara said calmly. "You know our business," Granger snapped. "This abomination cannot proceed. Living in sin was bad enough. Now you want to make it legal? Mix your blood with his? And harbor Reverend Ezekiel Whitman's fallen daughter? Have you no shame?" The Reverend pushed forward. "Eliza, come home. Repent. Give the child to a proper family. Then perhaps your soul can still be saved." "There's nothing to forgive," Eliza said, her voice stronger than Clara had ever heard it. "I was married before God. My son was conceived in wedlock. You cast me out for your pride, not God's law." "Silence," the Reverend snapped, his face dark with anger. "I will not," Eliza said. "I dare speak truth, something you've forgotten how to do." "That's enough," Granger cut in. "We didn't come to argue scripture. Clara Whitlock, will you abandon this madness?" Clara felt Cale's solid presence at her side, Eliza's quiet courage behind her. She thought of frozen nights, shut doors, and the cruelty of being turned away. Then she thought of warmth, of dignity restored, of belonging. "No," she said simply. "I will not." "Then you force our hand," Granger said, signaling to his men. "We'll take you by force if we must, for your own good." "Try it." The new voice cut through the tension like a blade. Judge Samuel Hartwell rode into view, but he was not alone. With him were Luke Harlan, Owen Fletcher, and, unexpectedly, Ruth Calder. Behind them came a wagon driven by an elderly woman Clara did not recognize. "Gentlemen," Judge Hartwell said pleasantly, "I heard there might be trouble this morning. Thought I'd arrive early for the wedding." "What wedding?" Granger snarled. "You can't be serious." "I can, and I am," the judge replied evenly. "The law is clear. Any man and woman of legal age may marry, regardless of race. You may not like it, Sheriff, but your opinions don't outrank the law." "It's unnatural," someone shouted, "against God's plan." The elderly woman climbed down from the wagon with Ruth's help. "I've been reading the Bible for 70 years, she said dryly, "and I don't recall God ever asking for our permission about his plans." Clara recognized her then. Eleanor Briggs. The line had been drawn. Eleanor Briggs, the widow who lived on the outskirts of town, famous for her sharp tongue and even sharper judgment. "Mrs. Briggs," Reverend Ezekiel Whitman said carefully, forcing a polite tone, "surely you don't approve of this." "Of what?" Eleanor shot back. "A woman choosing marriage over starvation? A man showing Christian mercy when Christians wouldn't?" She snorted. "Seems to me the only unnatural thing here is how cruel people can be while invoking God's name." "This is ridiculous," Sheriff Cole Granger snapped. "Luke, Owen, you can't be supporting this." Luke Harlan shrugged, unfazed. "I came for a wedding, and to collect my shirts." "Business is business," Owen Fletcher added calmly. "And I brought more fabric. Figured Mrs. Whitlock, soon to be Mrs. Cale, might want to expand her sewing work." Tears burned behind Clara Whitlock's eyes. Not everyone had come to condemn her. Some had come to support, or at least to trade honestly. It was more than she had ever dared hope for. "You'll all regret this," Granger warned. "When half-breed children are running wild and moral decay spreads through our community." "The only decay I see," Judge Samuel Hartwell interrupted smoothly, "is in hearts that choose hatred over humanity." He straightened in his saddle. "Now, unless you have lawful grounds to stop this marriage, I suggest you leave. The ceremony will proceed at noon." For a long moment, violence hovered in the cold air. Granger's hand twitched toward his gun, and Clara felt Cale tense beside her. Then Eleanor Briggs spoke again. "Seems to me, Sheriff, you're outnumbered, not in guns, perhaps, but in conscience. Do you really want to be remembered as the man who started bloodshed over a wedding?" Slowly, reluctantly, Granger backed down. "This isn't over," he said, the familiar threat sounding weaker now. "We'll be watching." "You'll do nothing," Judge Hartwell replied coldly, "unless you wish to face charges for harassment and intimidation." "My patience has limits, Sheriff." The riders shifted uneasily, then began to disperse. Reverend Whitman cast one final look at his daughter standing in the barn doorway, Eliza Whitman holding her infant. "You are dead to me," he said flatly. "I've been dead to you since you chose pride over love," Eliza replied, her voice steady. "But I'm alive here, more alive than I ever was under your roof." He turned away and rode off. As the dust settled, Clara realized she was surrounded by the most unlikely wedding gathering imaginable. Eleanor Briggs immediately took charge, directing Ruth Calder to help prepare a simple wedding meal. Luke and Owen spoke business with Cale, treating him as they would any respected supplier. "Well then," Judge Hartwell said with a faint smile, dismounting. "Shall we proceed? I believe vows are waiting." The ceremony was brief and plain, held in the main room of the cabin. Clara wore Cale's carved antler comb in her hair. Cale wore the shirt she had sewn with her own hands. Eliza stood as witness, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. Ruth stood nearby, risking her position to be there. Eleanor Briggs sat in the best chair, nodding in approval. "Do you, Clara Whitlock, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Judge Hartwell asked. "I do," Clara said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Do you, Cale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Cale answered, his deep voice filling the room. "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory," Judge Hartwell declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Cale kissed her gently, not with urgency but with promise, and something settled deep in Clara's chest. Not merely safety, not merely shelter, belonging. The wedding meal was simple, but warm with laughter. Eleanor Briggs entertained them with stories of the town's early days, when survival mattered more than skin color. Luke and Owen placed new orders for shirts, and even leatherwork from Cale. Ruth held Noah while Eliza ate the first full meal she'd had in days. As the sun climbed higher, the guests prepared to leave. "There will be talk," Ruth warned quietly. "There always is," Clara replied. "We'll manage." Eleanor pressed a small purse into Clara's hands. "Wedding gift, and an order for 2 winter dresses. My hands aren't what they used to be." "Thank you," Clara whispered. "Don't thank me," Eleanor said briskly. "Live well. That's the best answer to small minds." When the last riders departed, Clara and Cale stood together in the doorway, watching the mountains glow pink and gold in the afternoon light. "No regrets?" Cale asked. "None," Clara said softly. "You?" "Only one," he replied. At her startled look, he smiled. "I should have married you sooner." She laughed, leaning into his warmth. Eliza stepped up beside them, Noah bundled close. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we work," Clara said. "We build. We prove them wrong, not with words, but with lives well lived." "And the house," Cale added quietly. Clara looked at him in surprise. "What house?" He pointed to a flat stretch of land near the cabin. "Spring comes, we build. Bigger house. Room for family." Cale glanced toward Eliza and the sleeping baby in her arms. "All family," he said simply. Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks, from begging for a place to sleep in barns to planning a real house. From cast out and shamed to married and, at least by some, respected. From alone to surrounded by people she had chosen and who had chosen her in return. "Yes," she said quietly. "We built." As darkness settled on her wedding day, Clara Whitlock, now Clara Crowfeather, a name she claimed with quiet pride, sat by the fire beside her husband. Around them, their unlikely household rested. Eliza and little Noah, safe at last, the promise of a future breathing softly in sleep. Outside, the world might still rage against their choices. But inside, there was warmth, purpose, hope. She had asked only for work and shelter. Nothing more. What she had received went far beyond that. Dignity, love, a future. The barn she had once begged to sleep in now stood transformed into Eliza's refuge. The cabin that had saved her life would soon grow into a true home. one built not just of logs and nails, but of resolve and shared labor. "Mercy is not sin," Clara murmured, remembering the words she had spoken weeks earlier in defiance of judgment. "Survival is not shame." "No," Cale agreed, understanding without explanation. "It is beginning." And so it was. On the margins of society, in quiet defiance of prejudice and scorn, a family was born, not of blood alone, but of choice. A place where the cast out were welcomed, where strength was measured by kindness rather than conformity, where love crossed boundaries others insisted could not be crossed. The fire crackled. The baby stirred and settled again. Clara Crowfeather smiled. She was home. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for being here and letting this story live within your heart. If it moved you, I hope you'll walk beside us through more journeys of the Wild West, stories filled with truth, endurance, and grace. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay close. Together, we'll keep riding across these wide-open lands of memory and hope. Thank you. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our narratives bring inspiration from the past, recreated with fictional and dramatized interpretations for entertainment purposes only. AI tools serve as creative support, but the storytelling, editing, and emotional refinement are handled by our team to guarantee authenticity. We comply with content policies for AI use, avoiding impersonations, identity fabrication, or historically misleading images. All visual and audio content is legally sourced. Redistribution or modification requires prior written approval. Thank you for honoring creativity, collaboration, and storytelling done with heart.